In just 1 week of learning Python, I managed to build 4 working Python apps. The idea is I could build a life manager sort of application that I will keep improving on every time I learn something new. So the life manager could look at my finances, my habits, some entertainment, and all that. And I'll call this app LifeTracker Pro. So as of right now, I only used basic Python to get started and building functioning apps. So in this video, I'll show you how I used functions, data types, variables, conditions, and loops to build this application. And surprisingly, that's all you need to have a usable experience. So the first thing that we'd want from the budget tracker is to ask the user for his monthly income, right? So the best thing that we can do, or the best way that we can do this, is to use these things called variables. So variables work like this. You first need to define the variable that you would want. I can define variables however I'd want, right? So I can even say x is equal to 4. So in this context, what I'm saying is this letter x, see it as 4. I'm taking this x letter and putting 4 in it. That's what I'm trying to say. So even if I was to say, tell the system that, okay, could you please print x? So basically show me what is inside x. So print is a function. So we'll dive a little bit more in what functions are. But print is a function that allows me to see, or basically that allows me to display whatever I'd want. So in this case, I'd want it to show me what x is. So if I was to run this, you will see x is equal to 4, right? You will see 4 here. So since I told it to print x. So let's create a function. So we'll call this function income. Yeah? And we'll say income is equal to input. So input, we want the user to input this. We would want the user to input the monthly income, and in the brackets we would want the system to display, to give us a message, to basically prompt the user to enter the input, right? So the message that we'll put in is, please enter your monthly income. Income. And maybe we just want to stylize it a little bit and put it in dollars. Yeah. So please enter your monthly income. What I've told the system here is I've created this variable called income, and we would want to ask the user to input a value inside this container that we've created called income. Yeah. So if we were to, for example, ask the system to, oh, okay, print income at the end of it, and then we run this, please enter your monthly income, and then I say $600, and then it will then print out 600, right? Good, so this is working. I'll just remove this. So now we'd want to create the list, right? Since we decided that, oh, okay, we want the system to have a list of expenses, right? Create an empty list to store the monthly income. So we need to create this list. So this list will, the first thing that we'd need to make sure from this list is to create the expenses variable, right? So we'll call this variable expenses, and then say it's equal to, now to create this list, you just need to do this. Sorry, you just need to do this. This notation, these brackets, I'm not sure if they're called brackets, but I think they're brackets. These brackets, this is what initiates a list. So next, we'd need to put in a loop. So use a loop to repeatedly ask a user to enter expenses, right? That's what we'll put in here. Now, to create this loop, we can just say, this is a while loop. So the way I like to think about it is to think about it as if I'm speaking English. So while this is happening, do this. But if this is no longer happening, do that. There are for loops. So for example, in for loops, I think I'll show an example later on what a for loop is. So a for loop, you can always still think about it as if you're speaking English. And you can still think about it. So for a for loop, you can still think about it as if you're speaking English. So for every time this is happening, do this, you know? So I'll give you examples on all these types of loops. So in this situation, we've said while. So you can say while true. So what we're saying here is while the function that we'll put, while this is true, please keep on doing this, right? So I still wanted to think of it in that sense. So while this is true, keep on doing this. Okay. So this is the way it will be. So while expenses is true, that means while expenses is still going on, input so while expenses is still going on, we want the user to keep inputting this, right? So input, and here I will add in a prompt that will ask the user to enter an expense, and just so that I can at least give more or less like a prompt for the user, I can add in done if you're, or type in, or I can just add in or type in done if you're no longer adding in expenses, right? So what I can do here is just say or type done to finish. So basically, if you are done typing in the expenses, just type in done. Oh, sorry. Let me put in this so that the user can know what exactly I want them to type. So you can just type in done, and then the code should completely stop. Should be finished doing this. All right. Now we want to add in that function that tells the system that the user is done putting in expenses, right? Now we want to add in that piece of code, or that function that allows the system to stop adding in expenses. Otherwise, you will keep adding in more and more and more, and the system will not finish. You'll just keep adding into the list until you tell it that, oh, wait, I'm done adding things in the list. Please make the calculations for me, right? So to add in this function, what we would need to do is an if statement. So an if statement is a condition, right? So we're giving the system a condition. This condition is if this is satisfied, if what I'm going to write here is going to be true, then you need to do this, you know? So let me show you this. If expenses is equal to, let's put it this way. If expenses is done, then break. Yeah. So here, what we're basically trying to tell the system is, if the expenses, this variable expenses is equal to done, then break. Basically, cut it off, right? We're basically telling that, oh, okay, now the user says he's done adding in these things. So that's basically what's happening here. As long as this is satisfied, as long as expenses is equal to done, then cut the code. And on top of that, we just want to manage it a little bit, so you never know. Maybe the user might use capital letters. So maybe the user might use capital letters, or they might use whatever it is. We need to at least moderate that. We need to at least make sure that whatever the user types is going to match this. So as long as, even if they use capital letters or small letters, we just need to make sure that it's going to match that. So what we need to do is add in lower. So what lower does is basically tell whatever the user is going to put in expenses is going to come out as basically it's going to come out as uncapitalized, or basically just going to come out as a lowercase done, right? So I can maybe just give you an example. So let's just say lowercase is equal to input and then in here we'll add in please enter a word. Yeah, and then we're going to tell the system print this. I want you to print the lowercase for me, right? And this lowercase should be, well, lowercase, right? We're just trying to make sure that whatever this user is going to put in is going to be in lowercase. So let's just try to run this. And let's just say all of whatever I put in here is going to be uppercase. What? All right, so let me just give you an example here, right? So in this situation, I would want whatever the... All right, so let me just give you an example here, right? In this situation, I would want whatever the system prints to be lowercase. Whatever the user is going to put into the system is going to be lowercase. So to make sure that this happens, for example, I would want, I would call this maybe lowercase. Sorry, I got my caps lock on there. Lowercase is equal to input. So now we want the user to input something. So we can say please input a word. And then from here, we want to print that out, right? So we'll tell the system print lowercase, okay, lowercase, and then we're going to say lower, and then these brackets, right? So let's test this out. We run it. Please input a word. We would call it what, and everything is uppercase here. We run it. What's or what? See, works perfectly. So that's how this works, right? It's what we call basically a method, but we'll go a little bit more into what methods are. So we close this. Let's continue. Yeah. So now that we've put a break function. Would want to create, and then now would want to create another variable. So this one we'll call it amount. So the first one was just so that the user can add in what the expenses are, right? When we put in expenses, we just want the user to add in what the expenses are. But now we want the amount so that we can do the calculations, right? We would now say input, enter amount, for yeah, now we'd want it to tell it that please enter input amount for expenses, right? We want, now we would want we would want the system to print this expenses in this query, right? So we could but then how are we going to do that? If we want to just to take these, whatever is here, to come here, or like how are we going to do that? So we have this notation called f. Cannot really explain properly like what f does. Still confuses me a little bit too now. But what f essentially does is we are telling the system that we're going to embed something within the string, right? Within the string, within not just the string, but within the within this specific string, right? So what we're telling it that there will be something more than just a string in here. So to basically tell the system that, oh, this is what it is, we need to add in the curly brackets, and then we can call it that, oh, okay, so this is what we're going to add into the system, right? Do that, and then we close it from there. And then we close it from there, right? We're going to tell the system that, oh, okay, so we've created this variable amount. So within the amount, we'd want the user to add in the amount of this specific expense. So in this expense is just basically we're just basically telling the user, please tell me what the expense is, right? Basically, whether it's apples or it is maybe a gym expense or whatever, you tell me what it is and tell me how much it costs. So it will tell you that, oh, okay, please enter what that is, how much the gym expense is, right? So that's basically what we're telling the system. Now that we have added this variable where the user can now insert in the amount, we would want to tell Python that, oh, okay, take whatever the user is going to add, whatever amount the user is going to put into this variable, right, and add it to the list. So this is how we do it. So we can tell it that, oh, so the list that is called expenses, right? The list that is called expenses dot append. So append is basically telling the system that, oh, okay, we want you to, so basically what we're telling the system is we want you to add whatever the user puts in here into the list. Now, but then now I see a problem. It does not seem to recognize expenses as a list, meaning there's a problem somewhere, because it's supposed to highlight that, oh, okay, I've added a function called append. Usually it looks more or less like this. So let's just say x is equal to that, and then x dot append. It's supposed to come highlighted like this, and then we can keep going. But then it's not recognizing that, meaning that it does not see expenses as a list. And right here, as you can read, it sees it as a variable. Now the problem is that I declared expenses here as a variable and expenses here as a list. So we need to differentiate the two. So what I'll do is I'll keep this as expenses and then keep this as just expense. At least now there is a difference. And here as well, we keep this as an expense, just like that. And then now there's a different. And as you can see, now it's different. And it sees here that as a list, not a variable, right? Okay. Just so you can see the difference again. See, string variable. But then now we close that back up. Yeah, perfect. Now this seems to be going okay. Of course, that's usually there are like other ways of debugging these things. Code gets really complicated, but as time goes on, when we're hitting more errors, you can like we'll be able to see what these errors are. Like they freak me out every time I see an error or I see a red line or I just see a lot of these things. But then it's the process of learning. Yeah. So now after doing that, we need to create another variable. Now this variable, we'll call it the total expenses. We want to add everything and then add everything in expenses and then use that to make a calculation, right? So we'll call this total expenses underscore expenses, and then we'll say total expenses is equal to the sum of expenses. So total expenses, this is equal to sum, basically add everything that is in expenses, which is the expenses list. Yeah. After we've done that, we'll say savings. We'll call whatever is remaining savings because we'd want to create a variable called savings. This savings will basically tell the system that, oh, okay, we'll tell the system that, oh, okay, after we've added all these things, we need to subtract it, and then whatever is remaining will be the savings, right? Because that's kind of what the goal is. Now what we have to do is create the variable expenses. So now sum all expenses and then subtract it from the income. So we'll call savings. Go into savings is equal to income. Income, which is the first variable that we added here, right? We want to subtract income from all the expenses, So subtract not just expenses from the list, but total expenses, right? Because this is the sum of all the expenses. Total expenses. Now, after all that, we now needed to display everything, yeah? We needed to display everything. So now we'll say print you wanted to print everything. So first of all, I think we can just tell it that, oh, okay, we can just say print okay, so we can just say print total expenses. And then we still need to embed expenses in here. We need to tell the system that, oh, okay, we're adding in a different data type. Yeah, that's what they're called, data types. So they're strings, they're integers. So I explain a little bit more in a bit. So we'll say expenses, and then just to make it look a little bit better, we'll then add in the nice $sign there. And then tell it that, oh, okay, what we're embedding here is what the total expenses, yeah? And then we're going to say print. We're also going to embed something else in here, and then say savings. Since we want the system to display the savings after subtracting everything. call it, would now bring in the savings, right? Now let's try to run this. Ooh, okay. So we put in the monthly income. So let's just say I bring in 4,000, and then say enter an expense, and then say and then type done to finish, right? So the expense could be rent. Now I need to insert in now I need to put in how much rent is. So let's just call it 500. Now there's an issue here. So basically what it's trying to tell me is I'm trying to pass in strings, and I'm trying to pass in strings, not numbers, basically. So it cannot tell the difference between the string, basically text, and numbers. So I need to tell it that, oh, what I'm adding in here, these are numbers, right? Every place that I'm adding in a number, I need to tell it that, oh, I'm putting in a number. So we'll go back here, right? There are different data types. There's ints, then there are strings, and then the floats. An integer, an int here stands for integer. An int is basically a number without a decimal point. str is a string, basically just text, right? Of course, it can be whatever. We also use strings for even phone numbers, for example, because you don't do calculations with phone numbers, yeah? Floats are numbers with decimal places, right? That's basically what we need to tell the system every time. Usually, by default, the system always thinks that whatever we're passing is a string, right? It's just a text. But we need to tell it that, oh no, here we're adding in numbers. Here we're adding in numbers with decimal places, you know? And we'll work with more data types as the projects get bigger. The first part that we need to declare is here. Since we're adding in money, right? They could be in cents, it could be whatever. So we're going to add in, it's going to be a float, right? Because it could have a decimal place. So we're going to enclose this in a float, right? And then another place that we could really think about adding in the float, basically tell the system that here we're going to add in a number, could be not could be, it should be the next place where we're putting in the next place where we're putting in another amount, like dollars, the next place that we're putting in basically another number, right? So it should be here. So add in here floats, right? So we've told the system that we're adding in floats in two different places. There's here the amount and here the income. Yeah, so there are two different places. So we've basically added in two different places. So there's here the income, and then there is the amount. So let's see if this works or fix the problem. We'll run it again. Monthly income, we'll put it 4,000. We say rent, and then we say it's 500. Okay, seems to be okay. And then let's say we'll say food, and then we'll say food is we'll say food is 700. And then gas, we'll say gas is 800. And then we can just tell it that, oh, you know what, I'm done. Then we run this. 500, it subtracted the expenses from the total monthly income. So let's see if the calculation is right? So 500 plus 700, that is already 1,200, plus 800, that's 2,000, and that means it will subtract 2,000, and the savings are 2,000. That seemed to have worked perfectly. So now I'll just basically skip through the other so now I'll just basically skip through the other projects and then just explain what I've done. All right. So first thing that I would have to explain is the import statement here. As we know, the stock market is random. We cannot comfortably predict everything in the stock market. So the point is to create or basically simulate a random like random events. So the first thing that we'll do is import random. So what we're doing is we're importing a function for random. So random will basically help us to just generate a lot of like random events, right? So the first thing that we'll put in is balance, right? The starting balance. We'll just maybe I can add in a function where the user can insert his balance, but we'll see as time goes on. But as of right now, we'll just say they have a starting balance of 1,000, right? So after they have a starting balance of 1,000, we'll now have the stock price. Since it's something that we cannot control, we'll set that to the random. We'll tell the system that, oh, okay, stock price will be a random event. And in the random event, we want the numbers to be random between 50 to 150, you know? So we're saying that the stock price is random. And since it's random, in the random event, we wanted to create or generate random numbers between 50 to 150. We can select like any other range, but I think 50 to 150 could keep the game a little bit more engaging, and it'll take some time for it to go for you to go bust, you know. So after that, we would want to print stock market game start with balance. So stock market game is going to start with balance, which is 1,000. So stock market game will start with the balance of 1,000, right? And then, you know what? Let's just put it this way. Let it just not be a random event. Let's just say int input please enter your starting balance. Right? So this time around, we're just telling the system that, oh, you know what? We just let the user insert their starting balance. So after that, we can tell the system to print the current stock price, right? Which is a random sequence of events, and then after that, we'll now add a loop. So while this is true, while true, right? While this is true, the action Okay, so I just saw a spelling mistake here. Sorry. Okay, so while this is true, we'll create a variable called action. So action will basically be whatever the user decides to do in the stock market, right? So the action will then ask the user to input something. So let's just say input, do you want to buy, sell, or exit, right? So if the user wants to exit, it will break, basically cut everything. Else if the user wants to buy, then we'll then go to quantity, just another variable that I've created called quantity, and then we'll ask it that, oh, okay, how much do you want to buy? How many stocks do you want to buy? After the user inserts the amount that he wants to buy, it will then go to cost, right? So the cost will be quantity multiplied by stock price. So the quantity will be basically how many stocks the person wants to buy. It's not going to be the amount the person wants to spend, you know. So let's just say if somebody wants to buy 5 stocks, so it will be 5 stocks. So and if each stock was worth $50, so it will be 5 times 50, which should be 250. And yeah, it will be the quantity, sorry, it will be the quantity times the stock price. So let's just say the quantity that the person wants to buy. Else if the action is buy, we'll then add the quantity variable. The quantity variable is basically asking the user how much of the stock he wants to buy, right? So it will be an integer. So what will happen then after the person selects how much he wants to buy, it will now calculate. So let's just say now we'll call it cost, right? How much it's going to cost to buy that amount of stocks, that amount of stocks, yeah. So let's just say the quantity that the user selects is 5, right? And the current stock price is 50, yeah. What will happen here is that we'll multiply the quantity, that's what the asterisk here is. We'll multiply quantity with the stock price. So if the quantity is 5 and the stock price is 50, that means that they're spending 250 to buy 5 stocks, you know. So after that, it will then go into a loop saying if cost is less than or equal to the balance, right? That's what this symbol is. It's a less than symbol. If the cost is less than or equal to the balance, then we will then tell the system that, oh, okay, the cost minus or equal to balance will then print you have bought this amount, you've bought this this quantity for the cost of this amount, and your new balance is this much. Else, if you don't have enough, just print not enough balance. And then later, since we're going to add the cell function later, we'll just say else if all this is not satisfied, like if all this is not happening, maybe the person wants to sell, like else if the action that the user selected is sell, then we'll just print selling stocks feature coming soon. So for this one, this is what I've done. I've printed a welcome message. Welcome to the mystery game adventure and everything. And then after that, I have then created a variable called choice. So the user should input whether they want to go left or right. And then if the choice, I've put it all in lowercase, is left, you have found the treasure. If the choice is right, then oh no, you have found a wild beast, the game is over. And then else, just print invalid choice, try again, right? And then here, ask the user if he wants to restart. I will add in a loop here a bit later on. And then finally, the habit tracker. Now for the habit tracker, pretty simple code. It can look a bit confusing, but it's pretty simple once you understand it. So remember previously in the video we talked about having lists, right? Where we declared them by doing this. And this is basically create in this variable of x, we're going to add in a list of different numbers or whatever it is. So here we have the same thing, but it's called a dictionary. When you put it like this, we're creating a dictionary. So a dictionary basically will help just house the strings in it. So it's technically the same thing as a list. And then we'll then create another variable called habit. These two variables are different. So habits will be the addition or the compilation of everything that of all of like the habits, of all the habits that we're going to add it. So habit is per habit, right? So we've created a new variable called habit. So we're gonna tell them to input a habit you want to track, and then after that it'll go into an if statement. So if habit, meaning this one, this first habit, is not in habits, whatever we've put in habit, if it's not found in here, then execute this, right? So we tell it to execute this. So what happens here is that if it's not found in habits, then what it's going to do is it's going to add a new habit inside habit and then give it a value of 0, meaning for like 0 days. Yeah, we want it to have like 0 days since we've just started tracking this habit. So within habits, we've added a new habit, and now it has a value of 0 days. So from there, if the habit itself is found, let's just say for example, if habit is found in here, it's going to execute this, right? If we already have a habit, inside habits, then it's going to execute this. So what this is telling the system that, oh, within habits, since we already have a habit, what you should do is add 1 to 0, right? So we want to increase on the amount of days every time somebody adds in a habit. So let's just say I write exercise, and then exercise is already in the system. It will just show you that, oh, okay, exercise has already been added into the system. So now I want to be able to access all of these apps from the main, just like the main code, yeah? I just want to run this and then select which app I want to run, and then continue from there. So how can I do that? Yeah. So the best thing for me to do, like the best way I can do this is, first of all, I should turn this, for example, to turn all these apps into functions, so we can just call them in the main one. So basically the same way we were talking about print, for example, right? When we talk about print, or when we talk about input, or when we talk about print, these are functions. So these functions are already embedded into Python. Yeah, they are already put into Python. So we don't necessarily have to create them and then run them somewhere. No, we can just quite literally call them because they are already in Python. But the beauty about it is we can also create our own functions. So this is how you create a function. It's very easy. So to create a function here, you can just call it def. So def, from what I get, means define function. So we're defining function. We can just call this one track underscore budget, and then we can close this, and then just like that. If you have noticed, almost like all the functions have like almost all the functions have these codes. So what we put in here, we call them parameters. So they're more or less like if we want to have like specific conditions to be fulfilled every time we want to run the function. So I think we'll go a little bit deeper into that later on, but as of right now, let's just do this. So as you can see, I have an error. That's mostly because whatever I've put in here is not within the function. So we need to embed it into the function. So we need to add some indentations and then put it in the function. There. So now this code is okay. Let me do the same for the rest. We now have to create the main interface, right? So the main interface, I'm basically going to bring in all these apps within the main interface, and then what we're going to do is we're just going to ask the user to choose what app they want to work what app they want to work with, right? All right, so now that I'm done, what I've done here is that I've imported everything. So I've imported budget tracker, I've imported stock market, I've imported the story game, and I've also imported the habit tracker. So these are all the apps that I've created, and then the system is then going to print on a new line. So this \n is telling it, oh, create a new line, then print this LifeTracker Pro, and then we're then going to print budget tracker is going to be number 1, number 2 is going to be stock market simulator, number 3 adventure game, number 4 habit tracker, number 5 will just be exit. So we then tell the user to input an option. So we're going to give it a variable of choice. So after the user puts in an option, it'll be numbers. Okay, maybe we can just put input an option. So here we've called it story game, but it's white, meaning that it's not able to recognize what's in here. So let's just check. Story game, story game, adventure game. Let's just try to copy this. Maybe there is a spelling error. Yeah, okay. There was a spelling error. I think that was on my side. So we just put it like that, and just like that, it's now recognizing. And then habit tracker and all that. Habit tracker and all that. If the user selects 5, then it's just going to exit. Else, just tell them that it's invalid option. So let's just try to run this, yeah? Okay, interesting. It is executing the budget tracker. All right, so I was trying to run this code, but I was running into an issue. Every time I execute it, it would then skip to a different function. I'll try to run it again, and then it'll go back to this. And I don't know why it's doing this. I'm not exactly sure. Of course, here I defined some functions, and I first defined this whole process of selecting as a function, but then and then later called it in the same window that, oh, okay, this is what we're calling. This is where we're calling this function and just trying to return it here, but it's not working. Okay, so from some reason, this function, this input where we ask the user to add in their own input is clashing with everything. I'm not sure why. Okay, so at this point I have no idea what's going on with this issue. Every time I run it, it will first go into the habit tracker and then I have to run it again. Gets me to the actual dashboard. From here, everything else is working fine. If I select stop, okay, they here adventure game, run it, it'll go into the adventure game and all that. I don't know why it's doing this. I think I will provide an update later once I figure it out. But so far, everything is running.